All right. So for everyone watching at home, thank you so much. We appreciate you tuning in. My name is Keenan Lacey Rhodes. I'm with the Kepler Institute. I am the Frontline Solutions Storyteller in partnership with Climate Justice Alliance and Kepler Institute, focusing on community narratives and using storytelling as a tool for change. So um, speaking in terms of the times that we find ourselves in now during time of COVID-19, social distancing, isolation, and a lot of what was, I'll even say yesterday, a lot of communities around the globe are figuring out ways that we can come together and support each other and also build, not just to be able to meet everyone's basic needs during this time, um, but also how do we build for the world, um, for the world that follows this pandemic and this moment that we're in. Um, so I'm going to introduce each of our roundtable panelists, and also first, before I do that, going to introduce a few of the initiatives that we have at Kepler that we're doing as far as our own initiative to do what we can to best support community at this time. We want to mention our LEAD program, which is the local entrepreneur and arts. My apologies. Real quick. And the reason why this is important is because, so with this initiative, the Local Entrepreneur and Artist Direct Support Fund, we're doing a weekly giveaway to help out those that have been, whose loss of income has been affected by COVID-19 and all the shutdowns, by providing $500 emergency grants via a random lottery selection. And so our lead winner for this week is Fly's Nest. And the name of that person is Erica Scott. So Erica Scott with Fly's Nest is our winner for this week's $500 lead giveaway. And if you want to know more about the LEAD initiative, visit lead.kepra.org. As far as access to our other resources that we have compiled during this time in order to be able to help folks with this current moment, and also to share what other folks are doing in the community and also in the world, visit adapting.kepra.org, which this conversation is a part of that series, and pandemic.kepra.org. So if you'd like to watch this live stream after we are finished broadcasting, visit adapting.kepra.org, and also you can visit our previous ones there. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our panelists and then also a special guest that we have with us today, and then roll into introductions. So our roundtable participants that we have are Ted Hardy, Annie Smith, Beatrice Beverly, Valerie Davis, Wildstyle, Rosezalynn Sanford, and Guadalupe Solano. And our special guests, we have Shauna Murphy, DeAmon, and Pam Ross. And so I'm going to now allow them each a chance to present and introduce themselves. So first I'm going to ask, who are you? What do you do? What neighborhood do you represent? And as an icebreaker, in what ways have you been able to find joy during this time of social distancing? And I'll start with Ted.
How y'all doing? I'm Ted Hardy, Haughville Community Ambassador. I'm an event coordinator for community events, bars, restaurants. What I do during this time is I stay active by just being creative. I got a lot of time on my hands, so it gives me enough time to work a lot of my to work out a lot of my events that I have coming up after this is over, and things that's going on now in the community. So I still keep myself busy in a lot of ways, especially writing in this little book. So, yeah.
All right, and Annie, if you could go next.
Hi, everyone. I'm Annie Smith, and I'm a resident of the Far East Side. I live, work, play, and worship. I am retired. I have been for 3 years, but I feel like I'm still working. It's passionate work, and I find, is this when we're talking about joy? Yeah. The ways that I find joy are through the people that I connect with out in the community, through my family, through my friends, just seeing how so many acts of kindness are done as I continue this work, and just talking with my friends. They make me laugh, and my kids, they make me laugh. So I find a lot of joy and take time to do that as I'm doing this work.
Okay, and thank you for sharing. Beatrice?
Hi, my name is Beatrice Beverly. What do? We do work, I do work with Stop the Violence Indianapolis. We run a non-for-profit where we work in our community, with our people, with our families and the youth. I am the Martindale Brightwood ambassador, the best, neighborhood in all of Indianapolis. Oh, I digress, my bad. And what brings me joy? Honestly, when this first happened, what brought me joy was catching up on all the shows that I had recorded, right? But then when it changed on me, what truly began to bring me joy was just going back and doing some of the stuff, going back to the basics, right? Which was just cooking and preparing and having conversation, real conversations, not rushed conversations with my husband and my children. So that brings me a lot of joy.
Valerie? Do you get to speak?
We're having technical difficulty.
Okay. Wildstyle?
Hello, I'm Wildstyle. I'm the ambassador for the Northwest / Riverside neighborhoods. Outside of that and before that, I've been a part of the Learning Tree and just an involved member of the community. I think what's brought me joy during all of this is creating. So I'm a musician and an artist of some kind, we'll say that. And I've been able to work on a lot of music when I didn't always have time before, and I've been able to work on some art. So I've been enjoying some of the time that I've had, at least to be able to stay in the house.
Guadalupe? Are y'all good?
Here she comes.
Okay. Well, would you mind introducing yourself, Shauna?
I'm Shauna. I'm Shauna Murphy. On a dare, I have to say that I'm from the lovely island of Lesbos. And what brings me joy in this time is learning all about the different ways that people are helping one another and loving one another, and also joking around with my son.
And Valerie, you there? Why don't we go to Guadalupe?
Hi, sorry. My name is Guadalupe Pimentel Solano. I am a community leadership officer at CICF. I am originally from Veracruz, Mexico, and I think I know what has brought me joy, it has been seeing how resilient our communities are during this time of crisis. So yeah.
Awesome. And let's see. Valerie, could you introduce yourself? And then what ways you've been able to find joy during this time of social distancing? Any, okay. All right, DeAmon, would you mind introducing yourself?
Hey, DeAmon Harges. I live on the Riverside neighborhood and advisor of CICF ambassadors. What brings me joy is I'm with my family. So I travel a lot, so I'm hanging out.
Good. And Pam.
Let's see. So hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. So this has been a difficult question for me. And so I had to think about it overnight because I knew you were going to ask it, Keenan. So my joy is primarily really in just slowing down a little bit, not feeling like I'm all over the country, and being able to hone into what we're doing at CICF, even though that may not sound like joy because that's work. But that's been a big part of the whole thing of our mission of focusing on equity right now. And this COVID-19 puts us to the real deal and makes us have to dig in. So one thing I really appreciate is being able to just focus on what we're doing. I've definitely enjoyed family and spending time with my guy and people that I love. So, but I would tell you this, it's definitely, when I am missing community, which these individuals know and the staff knows. I've been in some hard times here recently in these past few days because I want to be in the grind. I want to be on the ground, and I'm so appreciative of KI giving us this invitation because these individuals are really what has given me life over these past few weeks, being able to connect with people and community right now, because my family and those who love me are saying, do not get out there. I'm close to community because of all these people that you will hear from today. So we're just happy to be here, and thank you very much.
Thank you all for being here, and thank you, Pam, for those words. So we can go ahead and roll right into the first question. So for each of the roundtable participants to answer, first question, with social distancing, how has it changed the work you do in community? And how do you see local communities adapting and showing agency and resiliency to the current pandemic? And if you wouldn't mind speaking to some specific examples that you've seen within your community. I want to start with Wildstyle.
Hey, so I think how the pandemic has changed things the most is obviously more Zoom calls and a lot more phone calls, calling people. I'm not a big phone person, so I prefer to just go visit somebody or, go see them or talk to them on the street. So I've obviously not been doing that, but calling people, Facebook messaging people, and you have to be a lot more observant. As an ambassador, we're trying to support the community, but also, we've have some ability to directly help. And when you don't see people in person or you're not talking to them, face to face, sometimes, you have to be really observant and try to ask the right questions over the phone to see how you can support that individual, or also find out, if they can support somebody else. So it's just being I guess, observing people and interacting with them in a less direct way for the most part. I'm still seeing there's a few people on the front lines that are also going around. So, we're trying to practice social distancing with everybody else, but there's still, we kind of accept that we're in a little bit more of a hazard. But, for everybody else, we're having to, do things over the phone or message or email people or text message, whatever.
Hey, Keenan, can we circle back? We did not have Miss Rosezalynn, AKA Pinky the Finest, introduce herself.
Yeah, I was going to circle back around to her and let her introduce herself when she answered the first question. My apologies for skipping over you, ma'am. trying to sort out all the technical difficulties we started with. Would you mind speaking next, answering that first question that we asked during the introductions? Who are you? What do you do? What neighborhood do you represent? And then how have you been able to find joy during this time of social distancing?
Okay, I'm Rosezalynn Pinky Sanford. I'm Cricket Creek Ambassador. Through this time, I found joy in my co-ambassadors because I actually been out in the streets doing different things, and it was frustrating and a little overwhelming. So, you know, just to be able to call upon my co-ambassadors, my team, some people that I'm married to in the ambassadorship. But yeah, that's where I found joy, is just being able to seek out, you know, like advice and compassion, and just somebody to listen to me that's actually doing the same work that I am.
And moving to the first question for the roundtable discussion, Ms. Rosezalynn, with social distancing, how has it changed the work you do in community, and how do you see local communities adapting and showing agency and resiliency to the current global pandemic?
Honestly, I work around a lot of Black people in the community, and they have a problem with social distancing. We love each other so much that it's kind of hard, you know, like step by step, but I've seen people and I made them more aware that this is actually real. So it's just kind of hard because us as Black people, we love to love each other. And right now it's like not time to love each other physically, but from a distance.
And Valerie, would you mind going next? Ms. Valerie? Okay, so we'll move on to Guadalupe.
Yeah, so I think it's been cool to see how our communities, or like within the undocumented and the like Latino community, like the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance and the Dreamers Alliance United, Proyecto Siembra, and Cosecha Indiana came together and started a fund because they wanted to have control over the funds and deploy them out into the community. And so I think that's been one example that that I've seen that has been really really amazing to see how quickly it was organized and how they've had they're really controlling where the funding is going or the money is going. So that's been amazing.
Can you speak a little more about what's the name of that initiative again?
Yeah, so it's 4 undocumented led grassroots groups. And so it's the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance, Proyecto Siembra, Dreamers Alliance United, and Cosecha Indiana that started a donor box to collect money to be able to provide financial help to undocumented families in the state.
Got you. Thank you. And all right, we're gonna try jumping back to Ms. Valerie. Oh, fears Ms. Valerie has left the chat.
Nope, I'm here. Am I here?
Oh, okay, cool.
Shauna got
Great.
me. Thank you, Shauna. You're welcome. Can you repeat it, please?
Yes, ma'am. So with social distancing, how has it changed the work you do in community, and how do you see community adapting and showing resiliency to this pandemic? And what are some examples of that you've seen?
With social distancing, a lot of the things that I volunteer with, like the food pantry, it's kind of hard to tell people that they can't come inside the church to pick up the food. We have to bring it out to you. You need to stand away from the door, because these are hard and desperate times, and people don't understand that we want it, and we want it now because we want to go back home. So.
Anything else you'd like to add?
No, thanks.
And and remind us, what's the neighborhood that you work in?
Oh, I'm sorry, the Near East Side neighborhood.
Near East Side.
Yes.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Beatrice?
You know, it's what everybody has said. The only other thing that I would add is, you know, the way we work, the way I work, is changed based on what everybody's already said, right? But I think from a community perspective, how they have adapted is they have found themselves becoming more vulnerable and transparent, right? Within the body of the Martindale Brightwood area, it's almost like Vegas. What happens in our neighborhood stays in our neighborhood, and we're gonna take care of each other, right? But they had to open up themselves to be more vulnerable, to say, hey, you know what, I'm not good. I need a little bit more, and going out and reaching out and knowing that somebody's gonna be there. They hear them. They knew they were already there, but they just opened up and said, you know what, I'm gonna trust you. So I've seen that happening. And when that happens, I've noticed how more neighbors in the community as a whole is helping each other, right? So you're practicing social distance, but you're not practicing social distance with fear, right? It's what Pinky said. She's still rolling. She's still doing. She's still going out there having that human connection because it is still necessary during this time.
Ted?
For me, I had to get a little creative because I'm used to being the guy around a lot of people. And so, and I noticed too with the community, a lot of my community, it could be named bad or whatever, but I noticed a lot of people have been using each other's resources to communicate and get a lot of things done. One thing we just did this past Wednesday was an Easter egg hunt, or Easter egg, like give and go. It was basically like a pumpkin patch. And I had a lot of people from the community pitch in, which I thought nobody was gonna help. I thought they thought I was gonna be crazy. But I know I seen somebody from like each street in the community donate something or just give their time to show appreciation, share, give respect to the thing. So I do see people coming together in this time. And using it in creative ways to stay active and communicate.
And Annie?
This has really changed my whole perspective and how I do this work. Because one, you are kind of isolated with the whole social distancing piece. And it makes you think about, okay, how am I going to achieve this outcome? Somebody calls or says they need help with food. And I can just tell you about Miss Mary. I'll use Miss Mary as her name. So I don't want to use her real name, but I had received a call that she's a nurse. She just turned 65 yesterday. And she was in need of some food. She had, oh boy, I'm gonna try not to get emotional, but she had, was diagnosed 2 weeks ago with the virus. And she's been self-quarantined. She wasn't sick enough to go in the hospital and she didn't have to be on a ventilator. And I was just talking to her over the phone. I didn't know her, never had met her. But by the time I finished talking with her, I felt I knew her because I could hear her pain. And when she asked me about food, you know, she said that, you know, she had a family member that had dropped off some ground beef on her porch. And I said, oh, okay. I said, well, do you have other food? Or are you just completely out? And she's like, no, I got a couple of, you know, frozen dinners. And I said, well, just why don't you make me a list? If you feel up to making me a list of the food that you want. And she was like, I can do that. And she says, why don't I call you in the morning? And she called me yesterday, and I could not believe what I had to do to have food delivered to her, which I knew Kroger's, you know, because I ordered food at Kroger's and went and picked it up, but I also knew they had a delivery service. So I went through that process. I had her list, and, you know, it was really ironic that she would ask me if she could get some meat. And I'm like, you can get whatever you want. And I was so glad that I was connected with an institution, say CICF, who made it possible for me to say to her, you tell me what you want and we'll make sure that you get it. And that's what I did. Then I found there was another challenge. And so doing all this work, you have to be prepared to run into obstacles and challenges, but then you got to constantly think about, okay, how I'm going to still get this outcome accomplished. So Kroger's, it was going to take a whole week before she could get her food. And I'm like, oh no. So then I learned about, still doing some research, I learned about this Instacart, where it's like having a personal shopper and they go get your food and you can get it to them a lot more quickly. So that was the route that we took in getting her the groceries, but also delivering her a package. Today, my husband took over some cooked food with some flowers, and that is what I have learned, and I have seen organizations adapt to make positive outcomes, and you do that with compassion. Organizations are having to do that. They've got to look beyond the way we always did things and figure out new ways of doing things to meet the needs of those in our community.
And one of the special things that I've seen about community resilience during this time is even just not just from an organizational perspective, but also just a human perspective of people doing what they can. Say, you know, me as a young person running groceries for my family because I'm not among one of the most vulnerable populations, which would be people with that already have compromised immune systems and also elderly folk. So being able to see that, not just with myself, but also with other members of KEPRA, with other young people, has been one thing that has also kind of given me a bit of joy and a little bit of hope in this moment. And also something that's really important because we're also inherently, I feel, communal people. And so this period has been also very, very difficult, not being able to continue life as was, not just in the sense of being able to go out and do what you want to have fun, but also just even being able to contact and hold and shake hands, high five, give hugs. So, and I'd imagine that it's not just tough on me, but also tough on other panelists. You've spoken to it, Pam has spoken to it, and wanted to open the floor to see if anyone else wanted to share that kind of that impact that this moment is having on them as far as their inherent sense of community. If they wanted to share that with folks.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yeah.
So one of the things that we've come to realize in all this is that we expand the definition of community. So initially we hung our hats on certain individuals to be out there representing the cause. But we realize, and hopefully Ted will speak to it in greater detail, that community has expanded to really being more neighborly. Wellness checks that were not happening before are happening now. Phone calls that we typically did not make to others in our lives, we're making now. We're reaching out to folks that we had not communicated with for a significant amount of time. So in those ways, there's an expansion of community that has happened as a result of this. There's not so much physical touch, but there's opportunity, and we're witnessing that in the growth of spirituality and connections in other ways that people had not given attention to before, but were forced to pay attention to now.
Thank you for sharing that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, for somebody that's also been receiving a lot more phone calls than usual, like it's one of the things that I appreciate about this moment is being able to engage in different ways that traditionally or usually me and a lot of other people wouldn't have the time for. I believe you asked Ted to speak a little more to what you were saying. Ted, would you mind responding to what I was saying?
I mean, with that, it's like I was saying earlier, like we all got the time to either do nothing or do something. So I took the time to figure out a way to get people active with using, you know, like you said, people always thought they would have to go to community center for resources or other things. So I took the time and worked with CICF to use my resources and my creativity with the community center to bring a lot more people together with us not having to be together in a sense. So I used the internet, word of mouth, and like I said, a little creativity to show them that we can do more things than just sit in our house and be away from each other and social distancing. So, like I said, I'll give you a quick rundown on what we did. I actually created Halloween on Easter, basically. So we turned Halloween happy. So I remember I did something, it was a pumpkin patch. I threw something on Facebook a year ago. And, you know, I reached out to different people and places, don't want to put names out. And I was like, I got an idea, let's do a pumpkin patch in the community. You know, at that time, nobody was listening. So what happens, I posted on Facebook, can somebody help me get a caseload of pumpkins to the park? So I end up filling the whole park up with pumpkins. Kids got to come out, you know, got pumpkins, blah. So this year, I had to, you know, Easter came up. That's always easy. Easter egg hunt, get 1 million Easter eggs, let them across the park. People can come out, get Easter eggs, they can play, get in the park, blah. So, you know, this happened, the pandemic happened, so I was thinking. I was like, how about me being a neighborhood guy, get with some of my community partners and leaders, and we create something. So we created a pumpkin patch, but on Easter. So all they had to do, we had, I think 150 to 200 Easter baskets spread out 6 to 10 feet apart. I had people help me fill them up, place them out right in front of the community, the Christopher House Community Center, and all kids had to do is register with their parents, register online so we know how many to make, and they come up. We had them about 6 to 10 feet apart, but I had about, Shauna was there, she's seen a glimpse. I had about 6 to 7 different people start out helping me like line these people up, you know, how to stay distance apart. And that was just a whole different line of communication that the community never seen, because they used to, all these type of people getting around each other and it's hectic and we can't control each other and there's drama and somebody's going to steal something and then this just with us being in this very pandemic, I know people was wondering how it was going to work, and the community members, not just the community center, show that we can come together and still make positive things happen for the young people and the adults at the same time.
Thank you for sharing that. And thank you for the work that you're doing in community to still try to make something possible so that we can still have creative ways to engage each other. That's really, really creative. And actually, that's a perfect segue into my second question that I have for you all. What is some valuable knowledge or tools that y'all recommend folks in community take a deeper or closer look at to educate themselves and help themselves in the moment? What are we not doing that we need to do? And also open up a chance for you all to speak to what you or others that you know are doing that folks in community need to know about. And we'll start with Beatrice this time.
For me, there's two areas. One, we're doing more video chats. I know we talk about Zoom meetings and things like that, but one of the tools, it goes back to that wellness check. You can always pick up the phone and call somebody, right? That's what we were accustomed to doing, but it's bigger than that. We need to be able to see somebody's face during these times, right? Because they're in isolation. You know, so I had my mother get on IMO and it was a job, right? To get her connected and so that she was comfortable with it, but just exposing our senior community and our communities to those tools so you can just still connect with that, especially when they've not been accustomed to it. And then the other piece, I would say that everyone needs to be able to truly understand is to identify the signs for mental health, right? And what I mean by that is isolation is a form of trauma for some people, and we need to be able to identify within our households what that looks like. Like if they're sleeping more, if they're, things that didn't bother them before, now they're flying off the handle. If they're drinking more, right? We need to be able to understand that and get in front of that so that we can help people and point them to resources. And a lot of times it's a matter of just having somebody from the outside, an ambassador or a friend or someone who's not in the household, just have that conversation, right? Because they can talk them off, because they talk from a place of feelings and emotions. They're not really angry, they're just frustrated, right? And so if they have someone on the outside having that dialogue and just talking them through it, it calms the atmosphere down. So I think those two things are, for me, are key right now. Having that face-to-face, not just that voice, seeing the body language, and then also being able to understand and identify some of those signs when their mental health is kind of on that fence right now. It's a little shaky here. May need to take a walk, may need to go do something a little different.
Yeah, I was just about to ask if you had some other tips for people that's listening, people at home, ways to take care of your own mental health outside of someone else reaching in, which is very important that we all do for each other during this time, and continue to practice community by helping one another out and also allowing the space to be vulnerable. But what are some things that people could do right now to be able to help out with their own mental health and their own mental sanity, being stuck inside?
You know, that's a great question, because people think it takes money, right? People think, you know, me being stress-free is going to the spa to get my nails done. For me, it is, but right now I can't do that, and I don't want to play with my nails at my own house. So I had to get creative and think about what else can I do, right? And one of the things I truly enjoy doing is cooking. But now I'm not just cooking. I'm getting creative with what I'm cooking, right? So that's my calming, playing some music. Go back to old school. We used to party in the basements, right? DJ Nice he be rocking. 6 o'clock, if you ain't been on there, I suggest you get on there and have your own little party. But the other thing, lighting some candles, just having that downtime, having your glass of wine if you drink. I ain't promoting liquor. Let me be real clear with everybody here. Do what you do. But things like that. But also journaling, right? Right now we are in a place that we've not been in before. Write down your thoughts. Write down how you're feeling so you can go back and look at that. That helps. I think for kids as well, we can't discount how they're feeling, because they are put in a situation where they no longer can see their friends, their BFFs, and all the people they used to interact with. But from a child perspective, get creative. Maybe, you know, bake some cookies or do something different, or even play a game. You don't have to have a board game to play a game. Make it up. Dance, go out there, take a walk, go count the leaves, make it a game. But you can get creative. It's whatever relaxes you that takes you out of this atmosphere of thought, right? Oh my God, what's next? What am I gonna do? What's gonna happen? Get out of that mind game, right? And focus on something else. So those are a few.
I think Pinky and Ted really, and if Pinky would speak to it more, part of it is acknowledging that certain things are needed in our community. We have people who are who do drink, who calm themselves that way. But Pinky, you've done a few wellness checks. Would you talk about what you've been doing with folks on the verge of domestic violence?
I don't promote liquor because I don't work for any liquor companies, but I grew up with an alcoholic mother and as well as alcoholic community. And it's important for them to have something to drink. It is. I mean, it's not the best way to help people get out of situations, but if only thing you need is a beer to stop beating up your wife, then I go give them a couple of beers just to get through the day. But sometimes, you know, alcohol is a drug. And it is something that people depend on, and some people that actually get physically sick about it. So I don't mind taking a beer to somebody just to keep their happiness or their sanity.
Could you speak to, Rosezalynn, anything else that you're doing that folks in the community should know about? And then also any valuable knowledge or tools you recommend folks in the community take a deeper or closer look at?
Well, I'm checking on people. I'm doing drive-bys. I'm pulling up to your front of your house, and if it's your birthday, I'm going to give you something. Social distancing is very important. I'm also making everyone aware of how important it is because, like I said, Black people really just think everything is a conspiracy theory. But when they have somebody that they can relate to come and bring them factual knowledge, then they actually start listening to you. I just always be available for anybody that needs me 24 hours a day. That's why half the time I'm tired. but just, you know, let people know that it's okay to be, you know, mentally ill. It's okay to have a dependency. You know, it's okay to worry and stress about it, and just encourage them, you know, different ways. If you don't pray, then, you know, shout or do something, you know, to make yourself feel better. You have to in this time, because there's a lot of mentally ill people out here that don't even acknowledge the fact that they're mentally ill. So I just go by and check on people. I mean, I actually have people that looks outside their window every day just to see me ride past and blow, and I might leave something at their doorstep, whatever I have to offer, anything that can make them feel better.
Yeah, I also think I agree with everything you just said, and my team has just talked about, but I also think it gets back to one basic thing, and that's being compassionate and just showing love. And even just if you ask one question to a person out of compassion, is just think about, what is it that I can do to help you feel better today? You know, and make that happen for somebody. Because all of this, I think, stems from a mindset of love. And that love, it transfers from you to the next person, from that next person to somebody else, because I have seen it. I've seen people that I talk to, or people that I know and don't know, they're stepping up. And I think during pandemics and crises, you see the real colors of people. You see those that'll step up, and you see those that you think were in leadership roles that don't even have leadership. So it's a test. And I think the test is real. And we have to be able to show love to our neighbors, because that is where it all stems from. And we cannot be judgmental, and we cannot say we can't. You know, our mantra really should be, how am I going to make this happen? What's going to be the positive outcome? Because there is so much negativity and despair, and people losing their lives, but people still have hope. And that is what we got to cling to. And what's our next step going to be? You know, how has this pandemic and the lessons that we've learned, how are we going to take that into the next phase? What are some things that we can take with us moving forward so that we have learned lessons from this?
Yes, indeed. And real quick, because I can already tell that you're an amazing storyteller, Annie. You started answering the first question with an amazing, impactful story. If you wouldn't mind sharing another story about, I guess, someone that you've seen passing that test, or someone that's shown up, that stepped up, that doesn't even have, you didn't perceive had leadership skills, but are stepping up.
My granddaughter works at Kroger, and she called me. She's 22, and I'm in that vulnerable category. You know, I'm one of the seasoned elderly folks, and I've got some health conditions, so I have to really be careful with the whole social distancing piece. I've embraced it. But she's always been quiet and never says a lot, but she called me and she said, I just called to see if you needed anything. I know that I work around a lot of people, but I thought I could go and do some grocery shopping for you. And just her coming over, she told me to put the list in the mailbox, which I did. And she came over, she got the list, she went to the store, she came back, she knocked on the window, she put all the groceries on the furniture on the porch, and she motioned, she says, pull the curtains back. So I opened up the whole blinds and the curtains, and she just placed her hands on the window and said, I love you. And I put my hands up against her hands and I said, I love you too. It was a different way. I mean, but she stepped out of her, like I thought, this quiet, humble, meek, young lady that never said a lot, but she showed so much heart. And she does this every day at work. She's going in, you know, being around lots of people. She's, you know, wearing the mask and doing everything that they're having them to do in the grocery stores. She is one of, I call her what you call the first responder in her own way, and she's a young person. So that came to my mind when you asked me that. I thought about her. She's stepping up. Yeah.
Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Wildstyle, would you mind chiming in on knowledge or tools recommend folks community take a deeper, closer look at?
I would say just how much everybody's came together has really been surprising. I think to many, especially my neighborhood, I think some of the people here have a perception that the disagreements and so-called infighting is worse than it really is. But I've been really happy that people in my community have, a lot of them have put their disagreements aside and are working together to take care of other people in the neighborhood. Whether they agreed with what that person did last year or maybe 20 years ago, a lot of them are working together. And even the people that aren't working together, that I may not personally agree with, they are, you know, reaching out to the community in whatever way that's possible and seeing about each other. And not just, you know, particularly some of the pastors. We have a lot of churches in the Northwest area. And a lot of these pastors haven't really connected, or the members of each of the churches have connected, you know, in the last 10 years. And you know, some of them are coming together along with people that live here and some of their congregants that live here. And they've been making sure that there's food available for people in the community 7 days a week, and have been, you know, actively coordinating all of this, even though they don't always get along. And then there's some churches that haven't been coordinating with them, and some entities and community groups that haven't, but you know, they're still cordial and still cooperating within their own role without stepping too far into situations that they don't care for. So I think that needs to happen. It's unfortunate that, and I mean, this happens with family a lot, that you end up seeing each other at funerals all the time when you could have been coming together for, you know, for better happenings. But this has brought a level of coordination and cooperation and I guess shared vision of making sure that our community is okay, that I haven't necessarily seen for a long time, if ever in my lifetime, you know, of living here. So this is, I guess, grace under fire, and, you know, one of the few good things to come out of it, you know, and among, you know, all the other situations going on.
Let's see, who hasn't gone? Let's turn to the next. Valerie, oh, go ahead.
The thing that I think is important that connects everyone and what they're saying is that there's relationship. And the question that you ask really gets at the question of what relationships do people have in their communities that can be strengthened, what are non-existent, and how do you build those relationships? Because for someone to watch their window for Pinky to drive by means there's a relationship there. And even though people are laying down their swords and beating them into plowshares in Wildstyle's neighborhood, that means that even though it may have been contentious, there was a relationship there. And there's a question about what is being missed and what needs to be learned. The important thing to learn is that the relationships within communities is what helps communities survive more so than institutions. The other thing that we're not doing that should happen is we're not asking the question of what do people have to offer in terms of this. Miss Annie has done it. Several of the ambassadors have asked others to help out. And in so doing, you learn a lot about people and what they're capable of. But what we've not done, we focused a lot on need, but we haven't asked the question of, in addition to what your needs are, what do you want to offer? If we can create those spaces. And Ted did that in terms of asking for donations. Some people gave a bazillion eggs. Some people can only give 2, but everyone had opportunity to give. And I think that's important for us to pay attention to.
And thank you for mentioning that piece about relationships. And I really appreciate the way you framed that question. This is exactly what I was getting at as far as relationships are concerned. And even a lot of the work that we do here at KEPRA, not a lot of it is about the physical, tangible things that we do, but which are important, so that we meet our basic needs, so that we create, systems that help community, and that also are ways for community to learn skills, but also a heavy emphasis on relationship building, because at the heart and at the key of everything, it's about the relationship that you have with people and also with the environment.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
Well, I was saying, I actually was just about to open up the floor to anyone else that wanted to answer the question, or also chime in on that piece on relationship building.
I think that Seana, as DeAmon calls her, Rain Man, did a very good job of honing in on one of the things that I want to just interject a little bit to make sure is a part of this, because if you're an institution, you're an organization, and you have a certain framework of how you look at these conversations, I don't want us to get all the way to the end when I talk about CICF for you then to capture and make sure you're listening to what's being said. These are conversations, this is real. This is what happens when you're talking about really engaging with residents and what's really happening with residents. It may be hard, I think, often for institutions to really get down to the real, because we sometimes have too much of a focus on data and sometimes too much of a focus on theory. So, this is an opportunity right now to really hear from residents, especially in a crisis, what is really going on, and then allow ourselves to be open to the realness and to the opportunities for us to engage with residents and with solutions with residents in a different way. So I didn't want us to get all the way to the end before CICF chimes in and that part is in here, because I've heard things that I know absolutely from a seat of where you have the resources or the power to be able to filter some of what's being said right now from a place of judgment sometimes, or is this does that make sense? This is not what this is about. This was us deciding we will be at this table in this 90 minutes to give vulnerability to all of these individuals who are out here doing this every day, who really don't have anything necessarily to gain by being on all these, nice squares and talk about what they're doing right now. They could go ahead and do it anyway. And I just don't want that to be taken away from in the rest of the time. I just hope that anybody who's a part of this, who's listening from a seat who could learn, that you take the time to just humble yourself to learn and to understand what's actually being said about what's happening within neighborhoods, what's actually happening within residents, because that's one of the reasons why I'm going to now shut up. But one of the reasons why I did start off with this, even though all of these beautiful people wanted me to start this off, to frame this, is because what I want to elevate in this is the voice of residents, not CICF ambassadors.
Thank you, Pam. I will say that I think you framed that very well. The whole relationship piece needs to also, people need to understand that it doesn't happen overnight. We've been doing this work on the ground for some years now. So people have to understand relationship building involves trust. It involves listening. It involves being with, going alongside. I'm a resident first because I live on the far east side, but I have developed relationships with people I consider good friends. I could start calling names, but I'm not, because I'll probably leave somebody out. But when I can meet someone else in a different, because the far east side is huge, but I trust people to come alongside. None of us are out here doing this by ourselves. We're out here taking those relationships that we have developed, and it's like we're bringing little teams along with us to help with this work, and trusting that it's not just going to be me, it's going to be the team and the teams and the teams coming together, all in this work. It's hard work too. It's not easy. It's really hard, but we have to be able to embrace, listen so that we truly understand. So many times we see people coming into our communities wanting to fix us, and that's not the attitude you have to have. You got to come in with an honest, true spirit of building and wanting to take care and not having judgment, and that takes time.
Yeah, and in addition to what Pam said, and then what Annie said, you know, with relationships, when you build those relationships, you get to truth, transparency, but then you get to transformation, right? You see the transformation in the residents, that they feel empowered. They like, wow, I had this in me all along, but now it's birthed out of me because I've created this relationship that gave me contact, gave me access to something or someone else, and it empowered me, right? And so they own that. So to Annie's point, we're not broken. We've never been broken. We have more value than people put, that they think we have, but we wasn't willing to really share. I'm sorry. Oh, we wasn't really willing to share it because we know when we share our value, it's been stepped on. Let's be real, right? And so it's like, now I'm not going to do this, but now we got the relationship which grows, and it goes back to that truth, that transparency, that transformation that's happened in our community, and from one to one to one to one. Yeah.
And thank you each of you for sharing that piece on relationships. And also to those that are watching, we're about to, after one more question and answer period between myself and the panelists, that we're going to open it up to questions from the viewers. So anyone, if you have a question, just feel free to type it into the chat, and then we'll see it and then answer questions as they ask questions as they come in. And that's
I'm
yes.
sorry, I didn't echo. Power is important. And the way that people approach relationships, the people who are on the call, echoing everything that everyone has said, if you're coming to the relationship and have not examined the power in which you sit in that relationship, you're setting up you're setting up an imbalance. So what makes all these people on the call on this powerful is that they knew they had power. It was just a matter of how they would use it, maneuver it, and help CICF understand how power works in their lives and in institutions. But critical to any relationship is the examination of who possesses the power, who's willing to relinquish power, and how do they behave once there's a shift in power.
And thank you for that last piece. That actually is a perfect segue to the last question I had, which actually I'd like to reframe a little bit. Communities, a lot of the communities that we live in, Black and brown communities, there's a saying that says, you know, when white people got the cold, Black people got the flu. And so even the idea, from all the things that we faced, the idea of even pandemic, even though no one has seen at this level. The idea of pandemic is not new to us. And a lot of us rely on those relationships, and a lot of us will rely on the resources and things that we have in order to be able to get through these troublesome and trying moments. And so wanted to ask each of you, what are some of the learnings that we can take from this, and how do we build towards that desired future state in the present with the knowledge, power, and assets that we have? And then also, what should be the role of institutions in that future building? And actually, I would like to start with Guadalupe.
And I got this vibe that you were going to call on me. I was mentally preparing. Yeah, I think one thing, and Pam has said this a lot in some of our meetings, the reality is that a lot of our communities have been in crisis, right? COVID-19 just kind of elevated those crises, right? And so I think one thing that has been in my heart is, how do we continue these conversations to build more relationships, a stronger community? For example, like myself as a DACA recipient, right? There's that risk that DACA will be taken away in the summer, right? So the reality is that after COVID-19 is gone, some communities will continue to have crisis, right? And so how are institutions learning, and what's the commitment of the institutions to their community, right? One thing that I learned from, working with the Indiana Undocumented Youth Alliance is we have frank conversations with allies. What are you willing to commit to so that we know what we can count on you for, right? Let's say an ICE raid happens, right? Are you willing to house someone, or are you willing to pray, right? Like that helps us navigate who we can call on. And so I think that's something that has been on my heart. The reality that COVID-19 could disappear tomorrow, but our communities will still be impacted by different crises. And so how do we continue these conversations? How do we advocate for different issues, intersectionality and all of these issues? And so I think that's something that I hope we're able to take past this pandemic.
Yeah, indeed. Anyone else want to speak to it before I start calling on folks?
I'll go. Like I said, I just, like everybody else was saying, taking the time and just doing community building and family building and life building. Actually, today I seen something on Facebook, and my grandfather's birthday was yesterday. So I wanted to do it yesterday, but I didn't get to the fire station fast enough. So I don't know if y'all seen that video on Facebook with the fire truck pulling up, and then
Right.
just pulling up doing a birthday thing. So what I like to do, and I've been trying to pass to the community, is like, let's stay active on doing things not in the old way. So time is changing, so let's catch up on what's going on. So today I got something to say. Hopefully I can get some footage of it, but that's all I've been telling my community members. Like, when you see things, like, I've been engaging them, because I'm more of the social media guy. Like, I'm on the internet probably 28 hours of the day, and it's only 24. So I've been engaging them to get in groups, like exercise and activities on Facebook and Instagram, and just, it's a lot. Like, even my mother, she's older than me, and she don't want to use no social media, but in this time, why not take advantage of what social media and technology can offer? So it's huge to just, for the people that's listening and don't like Facebook because people might be watching or anything, like, this is the time to learn. Maybe you do like it, maybe you don't, but I know it helps a lot of people get their resources a lot faster too. So if you don't have access to something, or you don't know something, use your Facebook friends and family, because they definitely out there looking just like you are, or maybe they don't got it and know somebody. So use all your resources, and social media is the fastest that we have at the moment with social distancing.
Anybody else want to speak to that question?
I know on my side of town, I was very discouraged about the institutions that I thought would step up and be the main ones in this fight against this. People feeling hopeless and needing resources haven't been the ones that are at the forefront. So I'm very encouraged by the little churches. My little church has 50 members. They serve 100 people every Monday, rain or shine, holiday or not holiday, and they don't have the resources. So I just think the disparity between the haves and the have-nots on these institutions, the average neighbor doesn't know how to how to access them. When I ask some of these players, well, how do they get the resources? Tell them to download an app is not a good answer. That's not a good answer. So I'm just thankful for the little one-on-one, the individuals, the people that, excuse me, are trying to make a difference.
Thank you.
I think for me, I would answer it in two parts. From a resident's perspective, I would say that we continue to rise up. We continue to rise up. We continue to hold people accountable for what they say they're doing. So we hold them accountable. I think from an institutional perspective, you have now truly demonstrated that you could have been doing this all the time.
Exactly.
Right? So you've already demonstrated that this can be done. I'm gonna need you to keep doing it. I'm gonna need you to continue to make sure that people got access to food, that children have access to Wi-Fi and Chromebooks, that all this is happening, and keep your foot off the neck of underappreciated communities, because you've demonstrated it as a whole that it can be done. So if you've done that during this pandemic, why would you even think about going backwards? And from a resident perspective, from me as an advocate, from an ambassador perspective, I'm gonna hold you accountable. You can't tell me you can't do it because you did it.
Yeah, the only thing I would add to that is what we are learning is the viability of neighborhoods. Neighborhoods that have been portrayed in a certain light are neighborhoods that are taking care of each other, that have always been taking care of each other, but it's being elevated. The other thing that I would say is institutions need to reapproach the philosophy behind what they do. One of the most important things that's happening in certain pockets is that we believe people when they say they have a need. And we believe people when they say they want to offer something. We don't waste time questioning or asking them to document either or. If someone says I'm an artist and we know other folks who are into art, we say, hey, how about you go over here and do this with this group? If someone says I need you to X, Y, and Z, before we turn to an institution, you guys have heard the phrase, I got a guy. There are all these invisible ecologies that need more light shown on them. Residents can only do so much. Institutions, it's imperative that institutions reconfigure the way that they have been functioning and discover those invisible ecologies and elevate them up, because in that way you build systems that are not dependent so much on one or two power brokers, if you will. Y'all like that? I got a guy.
Mm-hmm. I like that.
My guy.
We'll let one more person speak before we go to question and answer period. We have a few in the chat and just want to make sure that we honor the people that are watching and also give them a chance to ask questions. So if there's one more person that would like to speak to that question or anything else that the panelists have said.
Well, I'd like to talk about particularly in my community, the neighborhood groups, and I'm talking about neighborhood associations and just other groups that don't necessarily have a building, have been the ones that have been feeding people, and we were able to connect them with gleaners so that they could give out the food to people that they knew in the neighborhood that weren't likely to be connected with any type of institution or know how to get help from them. So they've been giving out the gleaners boxes, but at the same time supplementing it with gift cards and fresh produce, and seeing about how to get, help them and talk to them on a personal level to see what's going on. And, as much as, institutions can do, sometimes offering their building up, or in Gleaner's case, letting the different community groups come and get the food and distribute it themselves has been extremely helpful. And that's been a supportive way to help grassroots help their own communities probably more effectively than if any institution just decided that we're going to try to handle the whole entire Northwest and Riverside area. So and I think that's something that needs to be modeled when all this is over. I think philanthropy needs to focus on how to support and come alongside grassroots organizations that have the connections and know how to help people or how to utilize them, because at the same time as these community groups are helping the community, these community groups live here, like they're volunteers and they care, and sometimes they get to arguing or getting upset with each other as people aren't packing the boxes right or whatever or whatnot, but the show goes on and people keep getting helped by their neighbors and supported by their neighbors, and that's something that I think decentralizing the power, like Pam and Sean have talked about, decentralizing that power is allowed philanthropy to be much more effective over here than expecting one organization to automatically have their values in order and have it right and reach all these people.
Thank you. And actually, before we do, I just want to give one person who hasn't been able to speak as much a chance to, if she wants to. Rosezalynn, would you like to respond to the question before we move to Q&A?
Sorry, yes. I agree with Wildstyle. It's a different route. People have to be realistic with how to actually engage with people and learn to trust people more.
Okay, so first question that we got from folks watching, are there opportunities to make sure that people know or are able to learn how to use the helpful grocery store resources to order online? I can imagine it may be difficult for some to use. Can anyone quickly respond to this question from Marty Aviles?
I'll respond to that one. Dealing with a lot of seniors and elderlies, they don't know how to use it. So what we did to engage in it is like personally go and do it for them.
Okay. All right, so first, Imhotep said, appreciate you all and thank you. He's also listening on the call and also had a question for you all. How do residents change the power dynamics with institutions? And open the floor for anyone to speak to it. I think a couple of you have already touched on it with decentralizing power, but if anyone else wanted to speak to that, you have the floor.
I think DeAmon does a good job of speaking to this in terms of telling a counter narrative. It's not a negative narrative, but there's the narrative about how people can work within and outside of institutions to shift the power balance. So Dee, I hate to put you on the spot, but I kind of just did. Do you want to talk to that?
Let's see. I think in a couple of things we should back up and do. I think it's unfair for having to say people to make shifts without having to grieve, and that's power. And I think this COVID situation has caused us to grieve the horrible things institutions have done to people on the margins. So it's kind of a restart. But the other part, I think a little bit about social capital. We pretend, I think white people pretend that they don't use social capital and they pull themselves up, and that's power when they don't admit it. What I've learned, I think, working with Brian and Pam, I learned that those institutions are telling the truth. That when you tell the truth first, start with that and saying, yeah, we have hurt people. So that, and then say, instead of, I think Shauna, going back to what you've challenged us to do, is to ask a different question around that first, is saying, if we're gonna accept the contributions of everybody, what power were we willing to give up? And I actually think Pam should talk to that part, because I see that the stuff we're talking about, that's great, it's always been going on. This is just unveiled how we have not paid attention to it on purpose.
Thank you, DeAmon. Anyone else want to speak to that?
I guess I will, since DeAmon put me on blast. But I do agree that this is an opportune time for institutions, definitely leaders, people in power spaces, regardless of race, but definitely white leaders in our community, to really look at COVID-19 not as a reactionary space, but one that gives them the opportunity to recreate and reimagine who they are in the spaces of crisis that's going on a regular basis in way too many communities. So what CICF has looked at long before now, which has given us the space right now, because we've been working at it. Like we're not the experts. We don't have it all together. But what we have been able to do is to say that we believe. And so with that, we have put ourselves in the midst of COVID-19 to say we have relationships, we have some infrastructure that has been built, we have beliefs, we have values, we have core values, as well as some operations that allow us to respond differently in this space, but not as effectively as maybe we would want to. But we are definitely one of the institutions in this community, amongst others for sure, who can do much greater value, because we were already embracing the fact that as institutions, we need to share the power.
I want to add to that specific example. What we ask the ambassadors to do is ask their neighbors and friends how much money they give away that they don't expect back. And then we call them philanthropists. That is a specific practice around money, because there's a lot more money and resources and other currencies in our neighborhood. And that's the retelling of that narrative. So when they come back, we process that so that CICF would know this. So when community centers aren't engaged, we can put mechanisms with funding and relationships to use other currencies so they can engage people and utilize their gifts.
And some of you already spoke to it, but want to open up to everyone else. Another question that was in response to M's question is, what needs to be in place for institutions to learn from you all as residents? And yeah, you already touched on it, DeAmon and Pam. Anyone else want to speak to that?
I mean, the first thing is they need to have relationships with their residents. This is a group of people that represent specific neighborhoods as residents. So what not to do is to call any of the people on the screen unless they are residents in your community. Cultivate those relationships in your community and talk to your residents about what they have to offer first. The other thing is do your homework. You know, coming in, if you haven't examined some critical questions that DeAmon and I always ask, the main question is, what are you looking to do? And the other question is, what are you willing to let go of? What are you willing to lose? Because if you're not willing, if you're just bringing voice in to say that you have voice, and you're not bringing voice in because you want to experience the pain of letting go of power that you have held traditionally so that something else new can emerge, stay home, because you will do more harm than you do now, currently. That's my 2 cents.
Anyone, we got time for a couple more questions. Anyone want to respond to that one before we move on?
Yeah, be willing to change. And like Shauna said, I mean, there's no point in having an ambassador if it doesn't inform your decision-making and the process in your organization. If you're looking for somebody to tell you that you're doing things right already, then there's no point in doing that. And I think that it sounds too common sense to be true, but people really need to think about that and analyze, you know, are you willing to change? And that's not always going to be easy. That's going to be a lot of internal conversations. Is your board of directors going to let you change? Or is the rest of your staff whatever pressures you're facing, is that going to let you change and give up some of the power? You know, so that's a legit conversation before, you know, thinking about getting somebody else to get real input on what you're doing.
I also want to throw this in there. I guess Wildstyle, when you said your board of directors is going to let you do this, I think there's an absenteeism of a lot of resident engagement on a lot of the institutional boards. I mean, there's a lot of value and a lot of positive things that can come from the relationship of resident engagement on a lot of our not-for-profit boards. You don't have to talk a certain way, look a certain way, smell a certain way, just get a relationship going and bring folks. We're trying to, you know, look at all of the solutions, you know, to build neighborhoods, bring some of the people from the neighborhoods on the boards and let their voices be heard. There's a lot to gain from that. So that's what I would say.
In addition to everything that everyone said, I think, Annie, to your point, you know, there are organizations out there that do have residents on the board, right? But I think they need to get out of thinking as well that voice is collective for all those voices in that neighborhood, right? Because there are different needs at different times for different people, depending on where they are. And so sometimes we get caught up in, we are helping, you know, we hear them and they're in these meetings, but are you getting out? Being an ambassador has forced me to go out of my out, right? I was in the neighborhood, I was doing those things, but it's even forced me to go out even deeper and going out even, you know, DMI used to say this, and he still does, go find the assets. Go find those people in your community that's doing those one-offs and those small things. Their voices matter as well. It may not look like this and they may not be at the table yet, right? Because there's some residents at the table, but bring those people along. So be willing to not only change, give up that power, but know that there are other voices that's out there, and the ones you have may not be representation of everybody that's in the community as well. I think the last thing I will say, and I kept going, is, I forgot it. I'll come back to it.
So got time now for, thank you all for your responses. Got time for one more question. And that is from Tyrone Chandler. How are community agencies being allowed more funding to affect more people? And I guess that might be a question to those at the institutional level. Speak maybe more about what you all are doing during this time to be able to help communities out with funding and other community agencies.
So I have a whole oven being moved out of a door while I'm trying to say this right now. So I hope that it's not too disturbing. But so with CICF, what we have done is a couple of things. We have invested in a collaborative fund, the COVID-19 Community Emergency Relief Fund that includes United Way, Fairbanks, Pulliam Trust, Lilly Endowment, and Eli Lilly Foundation to be to respond, put emergency funds into the community in a collaborative way. I think a lot of people in the community have heard of that fund, 17 million. It might be a little bit more than that now. And so we're all coming together to try to figure out community-wide, how can we be as responsive and responsible as possible to the community in this crisis. In addition to that, we also have, I just know that is making a lot of noise in the background. So my ADD is acting up. But in addition to that, we also at CICF have a neighbor relief fund that is getting more to the grassroots level. that we understand what has also been mentioned in this time, that there are amazing people and amazing organizations. There are a lot of institutions are not aware of that are doing really, really, really good work and have already been connecting to the community. And so how do we help their capacity and their resourcing right now to make sure that everyone in the community from a relationship level has what they need to best support the community in this particular time. And I also say, like I said before, but that's not, for us, that is a fund that has been created from a COVID-19 level, but we are an institution that is building practices and conversations, and definitely what we hope to see, what we will see on the other side is how do we change who we are as an institution based off of what we learned from that fund. So we are acknowledging that crisis has been going on in many, many communities for a long time. And how do we take an opportunity right now to learn how to do things differently from a perspective of philanthropists?
And let's see. So it's about 3:27, and only have time for, don't think we have any more time for questions. So in order to close this out, wanted to open up the floor, see if Pam, if you had anything else that you wanted to share to close us out, and then I'll share a few things and we'll end the broadcast.
So first and foremost, you know, again, I want to thank we talk about relationships. I think it's really important to recognize the relationship that CICF has with Care for Institute. Well, the relationship that we have with Pambana, with Imhotep, and with Paulette are very priceless to us, because you all have come alongside, definitely from the beginning, been one of those organizations that's like, we don't have to have CICF money in order to do what we do. And I think that has spoken loud and proud as it relates to how we engage with residents. So thank you for this opportunity. But then, you know, these are amazing people. I think, you know, one of the things is that recently Brian Payne and I, our president and CEO, talked about is that this is not about trying to co-opt people into anything or trying to figure out how to make best sense from an institutional perspective of people and their lives and their perspective. It's really about how do you share the power of institutions and residents to make a difference. And at the end of the day, regardless of how we feel about institutions or how we feel about residents, it really does take both to make a difference. So how do you create that relationship? How do you make that relationship most effective for those who already have power, need the power to be elevated and the voices to be heard? And that's what CICF has really tried to do, is honor that relationship. So like I said, kind of in midstream, that's one of the reasons why I didn't want to have to say a lot, because I want to recognize the brilliance, the power, the strength of those who are on this call, because right now they're the ones every day who are wearing masks, who are out there in the communities, who are asking the questions, who are making the connections with people one-on-one. And when we talk about frontline workers, we absolutely love those who are the healthcare workers, for sure, the ones who greet us and make sure that we have groceries, the ones who bring packages and all that, wherever that space is. But do not forget about the residents, because at the end of the day, these are frontline workers. Regardless of whether or not you bring funds to them or not, they are absolutely going to love on their neighbors. They're absolutely going to make sure they check on them, and whatever it is they have in their using an old school term, pocketbooks, or in their pockets, they are going to put out there for those that they love. And as Pinky said, you know, we can't hug each other right now, but please believe that people need to be hugged, at least from an emotional standpoint. You just have to at least call on them and make sure that they know that somebody cares about them. So we absolutely care about everybody on this call, and wanted to engage in to make sure that people knew that this is not a power movement that should be ignored, especially right now. Residents are power. And if institutions are not taking the time to make sure that they engage with residents and figure out how to do this together, then they are absolutely missing a very, very critical time to do that as it relates to COVID-19, because it's not centralized. It is all over. And so nobody is left in a space of safety right now. You can create that social distance, as we know, even that's a privilege, but nobody is in a space of where this cannot affect you. So make relationships real, especially if you're an institution, and understand how to do things differently. So I don't know if I did what I was supposed to do. I know that the ambassadors right now, they wanted me to kick it off. I'm so pleased with y'all. Y'all did what y'all needed to do without me, and that's a cool thing. So I wanted to make sure that we, CICF, absolutely came in to say that we really appreciate our opportunity these past 2 years to get into resident engagement and not just organizational relationships.
Thank you very much, Pam. And also thank you everybody else that was on this call, including the Roundtable participants and our special guests, and everyone also that's listening on the live stream. If you would like to apply or donate to the LEAD Support Fund, providing $500 grants to entrepreneurs and artists through a weekly lottery, visit lead.kepra.org. The link is also in the chat. Might have to scroll up to get it. There's also a button at the top of the page to our Pandemic Community Resource Bank with resources for education, food, artists, small businesses, and more. And after the webinar ends, a window will pop up that will allow you to make a donation to the fund so that we can continue to give out $500 grants. And if you're able to make a contribution, any amount helps. One other thing, there's going to be a survey that after this call ends, and that'll pop up. If you wouldn't mind, please fill that out so that we also can get feedback on how we can further improve these community dialogues and these roundtables. And I want to end on a quote from Octavia Butler: "All that you touch, you change. All that you change, changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." And that came from Parable of the Sower, which is also a very relevant text at this moment. And I invite everyone that's listening and everyone that's on the call as a panelist to invite themselves and ask themselves, what are you willing to change to adapt to this moment? And how can we enact change together? And what are the things that we need to touch to enact that change? But thank you all so much for participating. We appreciate your time. Thank you for listening. Look forward to more. And also this live stream will be available on adapting.kepra.org after we conclude. But thank you all very much.
Thanks. Bye, guys.
Take care, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.